are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website, CanesCounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Make sure you also subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. Today, I have Alex Donno joining me from the Locked On Canes podcast to discuss Miami Hurricanes football and the transfer portal, which has been an interesting one for the Hurricanes, to say the least, so far in this winter window. Still have a few days left in the window. Miami did land a player this week. We'll discuss that with Alex. But first, I do want to discuss the legacy that is Cam Ward. Cam Ward finished 4th in the Heisman voting over the weekend. And there's an argument to be made that Ward, best quarterback of all time for the Miami Hurricanes, and best QB in the orange and green ever. So, Alex, I just kind of want to get your opinion just on him, and just for the simple fact that Miami had arguably the best quarterback. According to Davey O'Brien, he was the best quarterback in all of college football. Yet Miami doesn't make the playoffs. So it's probably one of the more disappointing seasons, just because you had a quarterback who was one of the tops in the country. Talk a little bit about just his legacy at Miami, and just your opinion on him finishing 4th in the Heisman voting.
I think when we all look back on the 2024 Hurricanes football season, hopefully we don't automatically jump to the disappointment, because we're disappointed that Miami finished 10-2 when 11-1 would have gotten them into the ACC championship game, probably would have also gotten them automatically into the college football playoffs. So you have that. But I think that this season is going to age pretty well when we zoom out after a few years, because like you mentioned, we just witnessed, and I've been watching Canes football for nearly 40 years, so I'm obviously a little fuzzy on the Jim Kelly days, but I'm aware of his legacy. Bernie Kosar at Miami, but I've gone back and watched plenty of footage and stuff, and even Vinny, but going back to the late 80s is when I really started to become aware of what I was seeing. And we've seen some quarterbacks who have enjoyed more success than Cam Ward. We've had 2 Heisman winners. Ward fell short. We've had multiple quarterbacks who have won national championships. So Ward is not going to have that same kind of a Miami legacy. But to what you were saying, Marcus, this was, to my eyes, the best quarterback I've ever watched in orange and green. I mean, spectacular season. And, I've actually, over the past several days since, he was obviously in the Heisman finals, even though he didn't win it, there have been some good montages out there. ACC Network put out one where you can watch every one of his 41 touchdowns this year, passing, rushing, and the receiving touchdown. And I've been watching those over and over and over again with my son, who keeps wanting to watch them over and over and over again. So this is the sort of stuff that I'm going to remember from the 2024 Miami Hurricane season. And Ward provided so much of that. And it wasn't just the on-the-field stuff, which is spectacular, because some of his touchdowns, cross-body to Jacoby George in the corner of the end zone, some of the great catches that Xavier Restrepo had this year. These are incredible highlights on the field. And we all wish Miami finished 11-1 or 12-0, but they wouldn't have been 10-2 if not for Cam Ward. And, we'll circle back to that with the Heisman stuff. It's why I think Ward should have been valued a little bit more. But, I think we're going to remember not only what Ward did on the field, but the field generalship, the leadership off the field. Anytime you get someone in for 1 year in the transfer portal, you never really know. Are we getting more of like a mercenary type guy? Or that's not the case for Cam Ward whatsoever. This guy was a Miami Hurricane the second he stepped into the door at Green Tree and the Hurricanes practice facility. He was a leader among men. His teammates, came to love and respect him within seconds of him arriving here. So I'm also going to remember the off-the-field impact that Ward had as well. And, hopefully we're going to talk about the quarterbacks of the future. If it does end up being someone who's in the room right now, hopefully these guys benefit from playing under and learning from Cam Ward for a year. And then, yeah, you fast forward to the Heisman Trophy thing. You're in the same boat with me. You said it. I can't knock the committee completely because I wasn't expecting Ward to actually win the Heisman at the end of the day. Maybe you can make an argument that he might have even deserved it based on the season he had as a quarterback, but takes nothing away from Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty, especially. I was not surprised to see the two of them as the top two vote getters, but being behind Dillon Gabriel in votes and only having 6 first-place votes. Ward only had 3 more first-place votes than, the next guy up who wasn't even invited to the ceremony in 5th place. So I thought Ward was hard done by that. I don't really understand why Dillon Gabriel got more votes when, like you mentioned, Cam Ward wins quarterback of the year from Davey O'Brien. Ward was named an AP first-team All-American. At quarterback, Dillon Gabriel was not. So for another quarterback to get more Heisman votes than Ward doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, Ward, you talk about where he sits in Miami history, and this is, again, why we both said it, that he's probably the best to ever wear orange and green. In one season here, he breaks the single season passing record, which was a 40-year-old record set by Bernie Kosar in 1984. And he also sets the new single season touchdown record, which was like a 36-year-old record this year. So Ward has done some things in one season as a Miami Hurricane, coming in and immediately having the best quarterbacking season ever. I wish he had been a little bit more respected by the Heisman committee, but Marcus, I'm gonna remember this one for a very, very long time. And yeah, you have the disappointment of not being able to win more with Ward, but I also have the memories of everything he did on the field this year and how exciting he made our team.
Yeah, it definitely was exciting. That's the word that I was going to use. I mean, just watching Ward, every snap was an exciting snap for Miami Hurricanes fans and us, the media, just kind of watching, because you never knew like what kind of magic he was going to create. So it was definitely fun to watch Cam Ward this year and just to kind of see the hype surrounding the program. He led the country in passing touchdowns, 36, and also QB rating, an 88. And he ranked second in yards, 4,123 yards passing. Also, 343 yards per game, which is kind of insane. And then points responsible for 254, which is also an insane stat. And, lastly, I'll just mention that he threw for 300 yards and totaled 3 touchdowns on 10 occasions en route to being ACC Player of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year. So impressive stats, and that's a lot of production that we will be missing. Yeah, we're going to get him one more time at the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which I'm very looking forward to. Looking forward to seeing what he does in his final game as a Miami Hurricane. But after that game, Alex, sadly, we will not see Ward in a orange and green uniform again, which leaves a lot of questions at quarterback. Now, there was a quarterback who entered the portal who a lot of fans think could be the right fit for Miami, John Mateer out of Washington State, by all places. Again, I guess that's where we tap in for quarterbacks, because that's where, of course, Cam Ward played his season prior to coming to Miami. So now the quarterback situation is an interesting one. It's a topic of conversation in itself to talk about, because many kind of believe in Emory Williams and feel like, okay, well, he's the guy. Well, let's just start developing our guys instead of getting transfer quarterbacks. We've seen a lot of teams kind of fail when it comes to getting a transfer quarterback. But of course, we've seen teams be successful, like Miami, with a transfer quarterback, of course, with Cam Ward. When it comes to Mateer, the redshirt sophomore was 224 of 347 passes for 3,139 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. Great production. Alex, when you look at this quarterback situation with Mateer out there, Ward leaving, Emory Williams in the fold, How do you feel about this quarterback situation, and do you trust Emory Williams if he is indeed given the keys to the car?
Yeah, I'll start with Mateer. I think that Miami's philosophy this year on transfer quarterbacks, it's kind of it seems to match up with my personal philosophy. Is that and this, you could say the same last year, because they held out for Cam Ward and they ended up getting him, and it worked out really well for everybody. Worked out well for Miami. It also worked out well for Ward because he raises his draft stock from day 3 to top 5. I mean, that's a pretty impressive turnaround for that. So Miami's philosophy seems to be that they're not just going to try to snag anybody, which I think is a good thing, because you don't want to disrupt the current ecosystem of your quarterback room if you don't have to. But then you also look and you see an opportunity for someone like John Mateer, and you ran down his numbers and the impact that he's had at Washington State. And of course, we all know that, Washington State, when it comes to the offensive line and some of the other talent, he'd be more blessed with a supporting cast at a place like Miami than he was at Washington State, the same way that Cam Ward was. And Mateer still had an incredible season, an 8-4 season. They got off to a really, really hot start out there in Pullman. And you can understand why Miami would go for a guy like that. He's the top quarterback in the portal, which is why, Oklahoma is basically willing to, offer him whatever he needs to get down there, including hiring anybody who's ever coached him, right? So he's that sort of a player that you're going to go all in to get a guy like this. And so I don't love everything about this portal era, Marcus, because there's such a delicate line you have to dance around when it comes to, as Nick Saban put it, microwaving your roster, right? That you look for quick fixes and upgrades at certain spots at the risk of kind of upsetting what you have through organic recruiting. And it's why, I'm not a big fan of Dabo Swinney personally, but I understand his philosophy. Like he very much picked a side. Like certain coaches haven't picked a side. And Mike Norvell obviously is a portal guy. Dabo Swinney is like the polar opposite of that. He just decided, I don't want any of this portal nonsense to mess with our organic ecosystem of our roster, so I'm just not going to do it. Like that's what he decided. Now, and they're having a successful season. I'd like to see if they have any shot to upset Texas this weekend. They probably don't, but they did win an ACC championship. That's great. But Dabo Swinney picked a side. Mario Cristobal is trying to have the best of both worlds, organic recruiting and also a mix of the transfer portal. And it worked out pretty well this past year. But all this to say, I'm not grabbing a portal quarterback unless it's someone like John Mateer. So we'll see what happens. Oklahoma is really trying to lock him down. Miami's trying to give Mateer a lot to think about. And the pitch to Mateer, it's very much going to be redoing the Cam Ward pitch for him. Look at how Ward benefited from coming to Miami for a year. Shannon Dawson, who I'm assuming is probably staying. I know there'd been some talk about him maybe looking at head coaching jobs at smaller schools, but I haven't heard a lot of that lately. So I'm sure Shannon Dawson and him giving so much autonomy to a quarterback, because that's something that Cam Ward talked about a lot, was Shannon Dawson gave me the keys to the offense, and that's something he appreciated. That's going to be part of Ward's pitch to John Mateer, and they're very close friends. Mateer played behind him for 2 years at Washington State. So, and Miami having, one of the better offensive line situations in the country. But, I know he's got Mateer some emotional ties to Oklahoma. He grew up a couple of hours away from there. He can reunite with his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, who they hired. So he's going to have a lot to think about in either direction. Now, to the other side of your question, if Miami doesn't land Mateer, like I said, I'm not just going to go out and say, hey, we didn't land this guy, let's now check out our B, C, and D plans at quarterback. I think if you don't land Mateer, you really need to think about putting all of your weight behind Emory Williams, who's probably the next man up. And Marcus, I value that because, again, Emory, I know some fans, because they only saw him, start, as a true freshman against Clemson and Florida State with a really buttoned up offense for him, wasn't taking a lot of risks. Some fans just decided, oh, this guy's a game manager, we can do so much better. I don't think that's fair. I mean, you've been to so many practices, Marcus. You see the way that Emory has developed. I think he's a much better quarterback than some people give him credit for. Let's remember, even coming out of high school, he was an Elite 11 finalist and performed very well at the Elite 11 finals. And he's got the right attitude. He's really intelligent. Now, he doesn't have some of the dynamic scrambling and running abilities that Cam Ward had. So you'd be watching a very different type of quarterback. But sure, I put so much value, to circle back to the Dabo Swinney thing, I put so much value in, trying to, a player it's been 2 full years of development so far for Emory Williams, to actually see that pay off on the field. I would love the opportunity for him. Like, I can understand going after a guy like Mateer, who you feel is like an instant upgrade, but if you don't land him, I think you throw your weight behind Emory Williams and give him an opportunity. And of course, Judd Anderson and Luke Nickel coming in would also have a chance to compete with him. But I think you try to ride with what you have in the room, because I also think it sets a good message. And, Marcus, you cover recruiting very well, and that if Miami is just going to bring in a transfer portal every single year, that makes it a little bit harder to recruit quarterbacks out of high school, because they're going to get so much of that negative recruiting from other schools that are going to tell them, hey, why would you go to Miami when they're just going to get a guy out of the portal and you're never going to get a chance there, right? So I'm sure Miami would still have a good pitch, but other schools would negatively recruit Miami in that regard. So if it's not John Mateer, I would love to see Emory get an opportunity, and I think Miami can do well with him. Again, this is not Cam Ward. I understand that, but I think he's an accurate, intelligent quarterback. He's big. He's got solid abilities, good leadership. And let's not forget, Marcus, Miami should have one of the more dynamic running games in the country, with Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle. And maybe there's even a chance Damian Martinez comes back. But even if he doesn't, Miami's going to have a solid running game to lean on. I think the offense can be okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Emory Williams is definitely a capable quarterback. I think he's a quarterback that can lead this team to many wins. Now, is he as special as Cam Ward? Of course not. He's not quite as talented or experienced. There's really not a comparison there. But I think he is definitely skilled enough and can definitely lead this team to wins, to double-digit wins. I really feel like Emory Williams could do that. But something to really kind of keep in mind here, though, is that if they indeed do go after Mateer, then you have to be conscious of Emory Williams then transferring out. I mean, this is the day and age in college football where, okay, Emory Williams, he's been kind of waiting in the wings, for, a couple of years now. It's almost weird to even say that he's already been with the program for 2 years. This would be his 3rd year with the program. So I'm sure he wants to get on the field. He wants to create tape for himself, to get him to the next level. And if he's going to sit one more year, Emory Williams is a great kid, but he's probably going to look at his options, and I'm pretty sure he'd probably start for an FBS program somewhere around the country. So that is something to really keep in mind. If they do bring in Mateer, Emory Williams is going to be on transfer portal watch for sure. And then you got, of course, like you said, Luke Nickel, who just won back-to-back state championships last night, by the way, lit it up again this season. I think he just keeps improving with every game. And then you still got Judd Anderson waiting in the wings as well. He's been with the program for a year. And then, of course, Darion Coleman down the line. So the quarterback room, when it comes to recruiting, I think is set up very, very nicely. It's just this year is an interesting one to see if they, land a transfer quarterback like Mateer or, stay put with an Emory Williams. I think either way, Miami's in a really good spot at quarterback. It's been quiet when it comes to the transfer portal, when it comes to acquisitions for the Hurricanes, but they did get Zachariah Poyser from Jacksonville State, originally out of Wildwood. I always remember, like, every time I go to Orlando, I remember always passing by that Wildwood exit. It's like the last exit on the turnpike when you go to Orlando. So he's out of Wildwood, small town, but this kid, he plays big, and he plays big at the nickel position. It's position, of course, of need. Defensive back overall is of need. What do you think of the acquisition of Poyser to the DB room?
I was very pleased, and like you mentioned, it's been a little quiet from Miami in terms of actually landing players. They've had a lot of visitors, but for the first one to pop, I think it being a defensive back, nickel safety, I thought that was big. And Zachariah Poyser was the best safety still available. I mean, he was the second ranked safety in the portal behind Dylan Thieneman from Purdue, who's a phenomenal player, but he landed very quickly at Oregon. So the next guy available was Zachariah Poyser, who played. Obviously, he's going to make a jump up in terms of level from Jacksonville State to Miami, but by all accounts, he seems like someone who's ready to make that jump. Because if you look at the other schools that were competing for them, it was Miami versus a handful of SEC opposition. So obviously, this is not a guy who was like debating between like Miami and Wake Forest or Oregon State or something. Like, this guy was Miami versus the SEC, and I think it was huge to land him. And I think that the possibilities, especially for his versatility in the defensive backfield, his proven talent, he was good against the run, good against the pass this past year. And this is a position, Marcus, because defensive back, arguably the biggest need, or one of the two or three biggest needs for Miami to address, because you really need to revolutionize your defensive personnel, I believe. I was really happy that this was the way that they went. And I'm also, the more that I learn about Poyser, because, I knew, I learned a little bit about him when he was scheduled to visit and all that, but I've learned more about him since he committed to Miami. Didn't know that it was his lifelong dream to play at the U. So I think that's fantastic. The logo still holds weight, even though he didn't grow up during the glory days. Like, he grew up with a lot of 7-5 type of seasons, but he probably remembers the turnover chain and stuff like that. So he wanted to be a Miami Hurricane. I think that's big to give him the opportunity to make his dream come true. And I don't know, just based on Marcus, the way we're starting to see all the gifts and the social media train with staff members coming together. Hopefully it's the sign that this is the first of several, or the first of many, because it looks to me like they're gearing up for a busy week.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. Miami usually kind of catches fire in that regard when it comes to even recruiting. When they have guys visit, you expect to see the bat signal at some point from Dennis Smith letting us know that, you know what time it is, So I expect to see that bat signal again in the next upcoming days. But Alex, man, there's still a lot of guys out there when it comes to the transfer portal. And, we talked about defensive back already, which is a glaring need. I think wide receiver has now become a huge need, especially if Isaiah Horton indeed, is in the transfer portal and goes to a new team. You have now lost basically all of your starters, your four guys that you had last season: Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo, Sam Brown, and Isaiah Horton. These were your top four receivers from last year, and you could be going into 2025 without any of those guys. And you got great young players like Ray Joseph and JoJo Trader still of course on the roster, but you're going to need to beef up this wide receiver room as well as some other positions as well. When it comes to players that you think would make an impact, I know you've been kind of watching it like I've been and everybody else at the different players that are jumping in the portal. Which name to you think kind of makes a big splash and you think would make the biggest impact for the Canes in 25?
I think the biggest splash would be a player who's visiting midweek, and hopefully Miami can make a big move, and that's Kevin Concepcion from North Carolina State. First of all, he can be basically anything you want him to be. I remember 2 years ago especially, he was basically NC State's entire offense. He was like 80% of their offense. He went off against Miami when Miami lost to them a couple of years ago. KC, as they call him, Concepcion. You could not find a better Xavier Restrepo replacement than Concepcion, because that would be essentially whose shoes he'd be filling. And they're different types of players. Concepcion can be more of a gadget guy if you want him to be. I'm not going to pigeonhole him into the gadget role, but he can do more of that stuff. than Restrepo. There's areas where you probably trust Restrepo a little bit more, but Concepcion's explosive. And, if Miami can really make a move for him, I know Alabama, for example, really wants him in some other SEC spots. But if Miami can really make a move, Texas A&M, I think, is near the top for him as well. You couldn't do much better than Concepcion when it comes to offensive playmakers. I'm also a fan of CJ Daniels, who is transferring now from LSU, and it looks like there's some momentum there for CJ that Miami might be able to get this one over the finish line. Now, with CJ Daniels, Marcus, I think if he does end up choosing Miami, this would really be a testament to playing 4D chess and building relationships over the long term, because he was in the transfer portal a year ago from Liberty, ultimately ended up picking LSU, but Miami came in second for him. And so if you can and we see this happen now with the transfer portal, that sometimes, like in high school recruiting, you come in second or third place for a guy, you may land him a year or two down the road if he hits the portal. Miami came in second place in the portal for CJ Daniels last year. They may end up landing him. And I think, to your point about Miami losing most of their top receiver production, Daniels, who had a good season at LSU, he was their fourth leading receiver, but he may look at an opportunity at Miami and say, I could end up being the number 1 or number 2 guy at Miami next year, and that could be appealing to him. So those are a couple of offensive playmakers that I really, really like. Another defensive player that I really want, or maybe I'll say wanted, because it seems like he might be trending away from Miami, I hope I'm wrong, is defensive tackle Keyshawn Silver from Kentucky. I know it was big for Miami to ultimately get a visit from him. At the time I'm saying this, he still seems to be undecided, because that's another big position of need for me, Marcus, because Miami, they've got some young guys that we really like Ahmad Moten should be probably a starter next year. I can't wait to see Justin Scott play more on the defensive line, but Miami's losing a lot of those senior defensive tackles we had, like Simeon Barrow and CJ Clark and Marley Cook. So you got some spots to fill. And I think we really, no matter what, whether it's Keyshawn Silver or somebody else, I think we're looking at someone from Louisiana Tech whose name escapes me. Like you need to land a big transfer defensive tackle and upperclassman to help solidify that room, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think defensive line is definitely one of those positions of need because of just the amount of guys that you're going to lose on the line, and you want to have a deep rotation on the defensive line, especially on third down. You want to have guys fresh to rush the passer. So it definitely will be a position of need. Hopefully they can land a Silver, but like you said, I've learned too that it seems like he could be trending away from Miami. Another guy who I like, who I think might be trending away from Miami, is Eric Singleton, the wide receiver from Georgia Tech. Looks like he could be going to maybe an SEC school, Ole Miss, but that's the type of guy that I would love to see. I think Miami lacks a little bit of explosiveness when it comes to the wide receiver position. They are going to need to kind of fill that need very, very quickly because guys are coming off the board kind of left and right here. A guy that did go on the board recently this week is a guy that I absolutely love, and that's Zachariah Branch. This guy is absolutely explosive. I had the privilege of watching him at the Future 50 a couple of years back. Great event held by Under Armour. So I got to see him in person against some of the best DBs at the time, including Cormani McLean and others. And he just was by far, to me, the best receiver on the field. Just really explosive, really good route runner, great hands. You've seen him for USC probably this season. Just, make plays. Actually, the last couple of years. So I would love to see Miami go after a guy like Zachariah Branch. I think he is just what this team needs, especially at the slot position. You can line him up pretty much kind of everywhere and disguise things and, maybe run, jet sweeps and reverses, that type of thing. couple him with a JoJo and a Ray Ray, and hopefully an Isaiah Horton. Hopefully he can stay with the team. Then I think Miami's still pretty solid there. I'm interested to see what Knight Carr can do as well. You still have Chance Robinson on the roster as well. These are young receivers that we're hoping that will develop into some great players for the University of Miami. So, but those are two guys that kind of stand out to me as big splashes when it comes to the transfer portal. But we still got a long way to go, Alex. I really feel like there's going to be more players kind of jumping in here. And this is just the winter window. I mean, Miami did really well in the spring window. In the spring window, they got guys like Tyler Barron, they got Damian Martinez, they got De'Anna Hill. So they got a lot of players kind of in that spring window. So we've got a long way to go when it comes to this transfer portal. I just hope they can make a big splash here in the winter window.
Yeah, I'll say this on the spring window. I know they've talked about getting rid of it. I think the spring window to me is so valuable because that window happens after spring ball. So you get to evaluate your team's practices in spring ball. And, hey, you may come to realize by that point, we kind of thought we had enough at a certain position. We really don't. So we need to go and supplement that in the portal. And sometimes, like, I think one of the reasons why Miami was so successful in the spring portal last year was like they landed Cam Ward, after the portal had closed in winter, because when it closes, you can still pick a school. You just can't hit the portal. Like they landed Ward in mid-January last year. And after they landed Ward, Miami decided, hey, we've got Cam freaking Ward. We need to be more aggressive in the spring. And then also because they had Cam Ward, they became a more attractive destination. So it helped them build momentum. But the spring window, to me, it's so important because you have a better idea of what you have after spring ball, and then you can go out there and grab some guys. So, yeah, I mean, between now, hopefully Miami lands more players in the winter. But to your point, the spring is also going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's Alex Donno representing for Locked on Canes. Make sure you go to canescounty.com to read his pieces as well after the storm, and, of course, a mailbag as well. Thanks for joining me again, Alex, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Marcus. Have a great rest of your day.
You as well, and happy holidays as well, man. We're jumping into this holiday season. I feel like this is the fastest year of my life, Alex. Like this year has gone by so fast.
I'm buying Pop-Tarts for everybody. I'm buying Pop-Tarts and toasters. We're all celebrating the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
Nice. Are you going to Orlando next Saturday?
Yeah, I will be there. I'm going to disrupt. Like, I'm going to leave, and thank God for this, but I get to leave my family reunion for a couple days, go to the Pop-Tart Bowl, have that a little bit disrupted, but yeah, I will be there.
Awesome. So I will see you there, man. I'm excited to eat some Pop-Tarts. It's been years, but I'm excited. It's definitely better than the Cheez-It Bowl because I kind of hate Cheez-Its. I was there for the Cheez-It Bowl a couple years back. Didn't eat the Cheez-Its at all, but I will be eating Pop-Tarts next weekend, and I'm excited for it. All right. Once again, that's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Also subscribe to this podcast on all platforms, as well as subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Until the next episode.